Thank you very much. I was concerned. I thought I lost my pointer. Okay, we're out of control now. Oh, we're out of control. Wait, we're going to get really. Well, I'm rarely in control, and as you talk to very conventional farmers, they will concur that I'm out of control. But that's besides the point. See if anybody else is coming. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Once again, I'm shocked on how many people decide they want to show up and listen to me babble about functional plant groups. So, welcome. The other thing, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me out and talking to you today. It's been a great meeting, great conference. The people I've been talking to, it's been an absolute blast. So, look forward to coming back next year. So the functional plant group. So when we're going through and we're looking at rotation, there's a lot of these different things. I'm careful I'm not getting too close to this so it doesn't squeal in our ears. So, but I tend to wander. So, one of the things when being the little gray hair on the side here, and I was talking to Jay Fuhr, and I said, I remember good old days when, if the tires are running a little low, you just go up to the service station and you pull up and you can get free air. And then all of a sudden, tires were a little low, I pulled up, and next thing you know, they're charging $1. I thought, kind of ticks me off, because once again, I'm Scottish Ukrainian, I'm cheap. Then here in Saskatoon, it's up to $2. So I asked Jay Fuhr, because he's a smart guy. I said, so, why? Why did, it started out free, now it went to $1, now it's $2? Why? He said, well, it's simple, inflation.
You need an app with that.
Okay, my girls said that wasn't funny. And so, so they said, here's a good one. Knock, knock. Cow says. No, cow says moo. So
That's a good dad joke.
So I got a bigger raise out of the first one, so I'm going to go with that one. Okay, thank you. So once again, as we're going through and we're listening to different speakers talking about the soil health principles, because I'm from Canada, I can change the rules a little bit. It's the same idea. But basically, I go with keeping a vegetative plant for many days as possible in the soil, increasing functional plant group diversity, reducing the amount of tillage, reducing the synthetic input reliance, and properly incorporating livestock into our management. Those are the 5 that I go with. So, being at a zero-till conference, I said reducing tillage. I'm more into getting most producers, when they're getting into the soil health, whether they're addicted to tillage or addicted to synthetic inputs, I want to ease people into it. I want to get them started doing something instead of saying, oh no, you have to be zero till. You have to be zero synthetics. I would rather them do something than nothing. So, I'm a little softer on that standpoint. So one of the real recurring themes when we start talking about soil health and building health is this increasing plant diversity. And when we were talking over lunch, and someone said that Gabe Brown, he's up to 35 species. Are we up to that? Is that the right thing to be doing? Is 35 the right number? Is 12 the right number? Is 3 the right number? What is the right number? And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. The biggest thing we want to do is increase our ecological functionality in our systems. Because when we're growing monocultures, how much functionality do we have? Diddly. So we want to increase it. How do we do that? Well, we have some tools. So when we have these different functional plant groups, what that's going to bring to the table is we're going to have different root exudate types. We're going to have different soil microbiology around these plants. We're going to have different soil functions of these plants. So as we were talking about sandbur earlier, why is it there? What is it doing? Why does it exist besides drive people crazy? We have these different root systems, and we have different periods of growth. when I was working, I did some work with Agriculture Canada in Swift Current, so really, really dry, desert-like type, and I donated some seed of some monoculture crops for them, and then I did up 2 blends for them. So they seeded them, they had their plot tour, and they phoned me up after, and they said, thank you for the seed, but we got tired of telling people when they came through the plots, they see the turnips, they see the ryegrass, they see the millet, and then they see the mix, and they say, why did you just water the blends? And they said, well, we didn't. So they asked me, once again, these are PhDs asking a dirt farmer, why were the blends better than the monocultures? And I said, exactly right here. We have diversity. We have warm season, we have cool season, we have taproots, we have fibrous, we have all these plants growing at different times of the year, reducing the stress on competition for water, nutrients, sunlight. But we still had the ground covered. We still had production. We'll talk about Christine Jones later. So when we don't have this plant diversity in our rotation within that year, within our years of farming, what do we get? We get reduced microbial diversity, we have nutrient deficiencies, we have disease issues, and we have soil structure issues. Okay, so if you're thinking about your farm, which one does it, which setup best reflects your farm? Are you dealing with something that's functioning, or are you dealing with some nutrient deficiency, diseases, soil structure issues? Kind of sobering thought when you think about it. So Dr. Christine Jones, I was fortunate to spend 5 days with her this just over a year ago, and I thought I had a handle of what was going on, and then you meet her and it just kind of, okay, yeah, we're started. So she talks, instead of functional plant groups, she talks about functional plant families. And in this functional plant families, there's about 200 plus that you can choose from. Anybody here can handle 200 plus options? I can't. She's way over my pay scale. So this will create maximum diversity, but it's very overwhelming, but very, very accurate when we look at native plant stands. Bless you.
Sorry.
You're allergic to plant families.
Could be.
So what I've done is I broke it into 5 functional plant groups. I initially had 3. So we had legumes, grasses, and broadleaf. And then I thought, okay, that broadleaf is a little too vague because by definition, if it's not a legume, it's not a grass, then it's a broadleaf. Okay, so a little vague, so I broke it into 3. And then when I was first going around talking about this, someone said, oh, so you stole the 3 sisters. And I said, oh, yeah, that's right. So with the Native Americans, when they were growing their maize, it was maize, melons, and beans. Guess what? Grass, legume, and a broadleaf. Oh, imagine that. Once again, repeating something that's already been done. But in this case, now we can actually take a step back and take a look at it, and we can look at this functionality. So, we have a legume, grass, and within the broadleaf family, I put them in as brassica, non-brassicas, and forbs. Just so, once again, we don't get overwhelmed. We have 5 things. I got 5 fingers, and a lot of times when I'm talking about different principles, I want to go with 5 because I have 5 fingers. So my 5 soil health principles, 5 functional plant groups, easy for me. So where we get the real diversity from is within each one of these groups. So the forbs, non-brassicas, brassicas, grasses, and legumes, we have options in a lot of cases of warm season and cool season species. And within each one of those groups, we have options between annuals, biennials, and perennials. This is where we get functional plant groups from. So that if you're saying, yes, I'm doing silage and I have a really diverse blend because I have barley, wheat, triticale, and oats, and that's my silage blend, I got 4 species. I said, yes, but you only have 1 functional plant group. That is, you're only dealing with a cool season annual grass. Yes, ma'am.
So if you have these other functional groups within your cropping system, do you have to have those functional groups within your cover crop as well?
Excellent question, and you're about 10 slides ahead of me.
Sorry.
There's
I'll wait.
and once again, through Christine Jones, there's a thing called the legacy effect.
Right.
And so if you can do monocultures, but if you have a really good diverse rotation, that legacy effect will kick in. Now, to make it kick in faster and go faster, the more diversity you have within each one of those years kicks in and just gets a multiplier effect in there quicker.
Thank you.
So this is where we get this diversity. And once again, when we look at, Brassicas, anybody here know of a warm season Brassica species we can use? Yeah, me neither, because there isn't one. So that, in this case, we have, for the Brassicas, we only have cool season annual and biennials. So, okay, so we don't have the full, 6 different options in the Brassicas. But this is that whole thing. We go through, and so this is nice and simple. So when we're developing a blend, what you can do is draw these 2 triangles and list the species that you're going to be using in your mix. Nice and simple. So that this way you can see your diversity. If you want to have something like this that's already made, go to covercrops.ca, that's my website, and there's a cover crop assessment sheet in there, and it asks questions for setting goals. And in that second page, it has this triangle, so that this way, if nothing else, you can just write in what you're planning on using, see how many times you get a checkbox on using a different functional plant group. So the idea is to use as many functional plant groups in rotation as possible. And this is where that rotation comes in. Where we can multiply it is using these relay cover crops, using intercropping, a pre-seed cover crop, post-harvest cover crop, or even a full season cover crop. And the one year I decided I was going to see, once again, Scottish-Ukrainian, I was going to try and get to grow perennial ryegrass for seed production without buying any nitrogen. So I grew soybeans the one year, harvested them, turned around, slapped in a cover crop with this, lots of clovers, annual clovers, underseeded to perennial ryegrass, and the next year the perennial ryegrass came up and took off, and we got no rain, and what did I learn? Yeah, I could, but we still need rain. So growing these mixes, we want to represent these functional plant groups as much as we can, and we want to let nature work her magic. But we need to know which of these functional plant groups play nicely with each other. We want to know synergies. We want to know the antagonisms. Which ones play nice? Which ones cause trouble? It's key when we're doing these mixes, because all of a sudden, we've had a lot of people using, fall rye is kind of a lean-to when it comes to cover cropping, but as soon as you put in a bunch of small-seeded species with it, if that fall rye gets ahead of it, the allelopathy will kick out and kill those small-seeded species. Because allelopathy doesn't care if it's a weed or something that we introduce that we want, it doesn't care. Allelopathy, it doesn't want to have competition. So if someone's going to use fall rye, get your cover crop started or your cash crop started. Then when it's established and the root zone is deep enough beyond where the allelopathy is going to be from your fall rye, then add your fall rye. So grasses, fibrous root system, lots of biomass. It tends to accumulate phosphate. Why is that important? We'll talk about that in the next slide. Mycorrhizae fungi friendly. For some examples, our cool season species are oat, wheat, Italian ryegrass, orchard grass. Our warm season, millet, big blue stem. And at any time you think that we cannot grow rhizosheaths because it's too dry, because it's too sandy, this is a picture from Western Australia from Di Haggerty's farm. 97% sand and less than 3 inches of rain. And you look at those rhizosheaths of what they can do is just incredible. So when we deal with our legumes, typically it tends to be a taproot, but it can be a branching taproot or a fibrous system. With the relationship with rhizobium, it fixes atmospheric nitrogen, but it requires high phosphate. Highly mycorrhizal friendly, minus lupins. Lupins are not mycorrhizal friendly. Cool season, your peas, hairy vetch, alfalfa, your warm season, soybeans, sun hemp, mung beans. So why did I mention that the legumes need lots of phosphate and grasses accumulate phosphate? Anybody know why? Synergies. And that synergy is right here, mycorrhizae fungi. So that when we go through, and if we're going to grow a hay crop and we're growing straight alfalfa, we're growing straight grass, Then we grow a field of alfalfa and grass. Which one is going to produce the most tons year after year? The mix. Why? Synergy.
Does it do it the first year?
It can. It can. There's some establishment things in there, but with the mycorrhizae fungi, when you are growing legumes and grasses, and it isn't just legumes and grasses, it could be forbs, it could be anything that's mycorrhizal, and we can get that mycorrhizal bridge between a legume and these other plants that need nitrogen. So in this case, if we're growing oats and peas together, so we get the germination, these plants start growing, the oats send out the signal saying, hey, I need some nitrogen. Mycorrhizae hear it, they come in, they inoculate the grass, and they said, oh yeah, we can get you some nitrogen. We have a couple ways of doing it, but we're gonna need some carbon. So okay, here's some carbon. So the mycorrhizae goes out and they get the signal from the legume saying, hey, we need some phosphate. And the mycorrhizae says, oh yeah, we have a free living phosphate solubilizer associated with a mycorrhizae, and we have this guy over here named oats that is accumulating phosphate, but he needs nitrogen. So the phosphate moves into the legume, moves down into the nodules of the plant. The nodules then have that phosphate in order to get the energy cranked up in it to be able to break the nitrogen bonds, fixes nitrogen, transfers that over to the oats. The oats then move the phosphate back into the legume. Beautiful system. Yes?
Does something like that need to be like in the same rows, or what if you're 15 inches off or 10 inches off?
So the question is, do they have to be in the same row, or are they okay 15 inches across? And then it's going to go back to your root development. So if those roots can get over from the oats close enough to the peas, then it's going to be quicker. So 15 inches is going to be a little slower. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But on the flip side, we put a fungicide seed treatment on either one of them. That's going to stop mycorrhizae infection. And this is where, with soybeans, if we put a fungicide seed treatment on a soybean plant, we will see a response to phosphate fertilizers. If you do not put a fungicide seed treatment on soybeans, you will not see a response in phosphate fertilizers if you have mycorrhizae. Really neat stuff when we get deeper into this. So our brassicas, the radish is kind of the one that has kind of driven the cover crop expansion. It's showy, it's easy to establish, and when you look at it, so the soil surface is about here, so you can see that my hard pan was right about here because that's where it's kinked over. Really showy, easy to manage. It was kind of the starter drug of cover croppers. Some of them have tubers, but most of them do have tap roots. They're nutrient scavengers, so they will not play nice when you get too high of rates in with your cover crops or your cash crops. They will steal nutrients from your cash crop and will not release them until they rot and die. Limited mycorrhizae fungi associations, most the research has shown that they're non-mycorrhizal, but there's some weird ways that they're able to utilize mycorrhizae indirectly. Very acidic root systems, so that's how they get a lot of the free nutrients out of the soil, releasing acids, freeing up nutrients, and then reabsorbing them. So, radishes, collards, turnips, some of the examples of some of these brassicas. Yep. So the question is, if you manage the seeding rates, will that affect the pH in the soil? So you're dealing with alkaline soils. So it's because we have so much buffering capacity in our soils, it'll happen quickly. It'll drop quickly, but then it bounces back so fast. So on our soils, on our farm, we were about 8.2 for pH, and the only solid way of bringing that pH down to that 7.2 range is fungi. Conversely, in Western Australia, they deal with pHs down in that 4 range, which, a lot of you are familiar with that. Haggerty's are in the 6 range. Why? Because they have more fungi in the soil. So guess what? The way that we're going to fix our soils is getting more active fungi active in our soils. And how do we do that? Make sure we have good hosts. And Dr. Christine Jones said the first thing you do in agriculture to get on regen ag is get rid of your seed-based fungicides as much as you can. So non-brassica broadleaf, it's a catch-all. So just by default, if it's not a brassica, okay, we'll call it a non-brassica broadleaf. Various root systems, various ecological specializations, mostly mycorrhizae fungi friendly, and some examples are flax and beets, and then our warm season are sunflower and buckwheat. The other one that we are really underrepresented in our rotations, whether it's livestock, whether it's grain, is this forb. And the definition of a forb is a flowering herbaceous plant. So one of the things that I've been working with the one seed company in Canada is seeing what flowers we can get seed in to put into the blends for our pastures and hay, so we can fill up more of this forb category. Because if you ever have let's go back to Yellowstone National Park. Back in the days when they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone Park, there was a big hullabaloo about it because, how can you bring a predator in? And because it's going to mess things up. Because the bison, they're always camped out in those big meadows, and they're so happy and complacent. Well, what they found is when they brought the wolves in, it was moving the elk and the bison around so that this way they were rotationally grazing. And in these big meadows, all of a sudden these wildflowers started showing up. Why? Because as soon as something has a flower, where's nutrition? It's in the flower. And so whatever an animal is grazing, it's going to graze the flowers first. Those will always disappear. So they always camp out on it, they'll actually outgraze those flowers, and they'll disappear. So interesting stuff, isn't it? So when we start looking at these forbs, sometimes the legumes are included in forbs, but because the legumes they have a special niche of fixing nitrogen, I have them separate. So do you put them in, do you put them on? I don't care. But basically, once again, Christine Jones, she said the average pasture in the world is 60% forb, 40% grass. So it kind of bent my head when she told me that one. These are really important in diets because they contain a lot of secondary plant metabolites than other species. Very mycorrhizae friendly. Anybody know what this plant is? Phacelia. In Holland, when they're growing tulips, when they harvest the tulips, there's only one way to harvest tulips, much like with potatoes. You have to rip up the soil so it destroys the soil structure. The tulip farmers know in order to bring that field back into production, they go with extremely high rates of Phacelia. As soon as that digger is done, they're out seeding it. Then the fight starts with the beekeepers because Phacelia is crack cocaine for bees. It produces some of the highest quality honey. It's a really good nectar source.
And 6 weeks from seed to bloom and 6 weeks of blooming.
Everybody got that one?
What?
6 weeks after it germinates, it'll start blooming, and it'll bloom for, actually it's beyond 6 weeks. It'll bloom just about all summer. In most of my cover crop blends that I'm haying, producing feed, I'll put about a pound of seed down. And when these things starts flowering, it's almost deafening with the amount of bees out there, and there's not a honeybee hive within 40 miles of the farm. So they're just massive. So the cool season species, you have Phacelia, plantain, and your warm season is chicory. Chicory is another one that I absolutely love, but we'll get deeper into that. Yes, sir.
Borage in this part, or is borage
Borage is in the same family as the Phacelia. Yeah. But little nasty for dealing with because it's indeterminate growth, and it'll tip its head over and it'll drop the seed out, and it can cause issues.
what family is that in?
It's in the forb family. And so Phacelia is actually the Latin name for it. It's native to Western North America.
Is the same family chicories in?
Chicory is a little different family. It's an aster family.
Asteraceae?
Yep. So your mixes are going to depend on your goals. If someone says they want to grow a cover crop, I'm going to say, what are you going to do with them? So, having that goal set up is extremely important. And, if it's grain production, what do you want to do? Do you want to reduce the amount of synthetic N you're adding? Do you want to loosen up that hard soil? Do you want to reduce the weed pressure? That sound familiar to anybody? These are all options. And once again, what do we do before? Before fertilizer, 1940s, we had developed systems that were working. So with livestock, do you want to graze it? Do you want to stockpile graze it? Do you want to rotational graze it? Or do you want insurance? Anybody here have too much feed? Too much grazing? Yeah, not a bad thing to have in the back pocket. Are we going to hay or silage it? Or with some of the dairies, what we're doing is we're having these cover crops that we're going out and doing an early cut of silage, and it's leaving a spot where we can go out and spread manure onto a green living plant. What does that mean? We're not losing as much nutrients. We're making those cycle. We're playing catch and release. So when we're going through and we're developing these blends, all these groups except for the legumes need nitrogen. The legumes supply nitrogen, they need phosphate, but these groups all supply phosphate. Once again, just like nature has done this once or twice before. So your grasses, forbs, non-brassicas, mycorrhizae friendly, that's good to know. Growing together, they work together as long as we keep our plant densities in check. This is a neat little project that we did in southern Saskatchewan. They had a barrel filled full of soil, seeded a cover crop mix on it, and then they got a grinder and they cut a third of the side of the barrel out. And then they got a garden hose and just gently washed the soil away. And you get to see the interactions of the roots down in the soil. So a good visual. So the microbiome, I don't know if this is getting too deep for some people, but I find it absolutely fascinating. So what we want to do is improve our plant microbiome. So when we're growing, these seed crops, most of them come from monocultures, highly synthetic, fungicide, really gone to the uniformity of the monoculture. But when we start intermingling different functional plant groups like this, and we get that interaction between the different functional plant groups, each one of these functional plant groups has its own microbiome. And even within the same species, so if we have, you're growing some wheat and you mix some of your wheat with a neighbor's wheat or someone that's, 30 miles away, you mix those together, it has a slightly different microbiome. When we do that mixing, we start turning on and turning off genes within that plant. When we do that, now we are going to be gaining some advantage of plant production. So what we're able to do is, so if we have let's go red clover. We throw some red clover in, we have it in the wheat, we start getting a little wet. Well, there may be a microbe growing on that red clover plant that will transfer over to our wheat because we have root intermingling. And then what's going to happen is that gene may turn on to allow that wheat to go through a wet spell better. It may be a disease resistance. It could be drought resistance. It's a lot of these microbiomes. We're only starting to scratch the surface on this. Never mind what's in our guts. So it's a really neat part. And when I was talking to Christine Jones, I said, we need to get out there and we need to be talking about this. She goes, why? It's been out there since the 1960s. We've known about it. I said, why don't we know about it as farmers? Because as farmers, that makes a huge difference on how we can make our own, keeping our seed stock more resilient, more producing more for us with less. So the struggling plants, if this plant is struggling, it could have a plant beside it that is thriving. Well, that thriving plant, it needs that neighbor to survive. Not thrive, but survive. So it will share its microbiome with it. That is this key. So it's, once again, really neat thing. This gene expression, once again, way past my pay scale, but Christine Jones, I asked her to if I could share this slide because it is starting to get a little more controversial, so I thought I need to have a reference saying it's well above my pay scale. This is in her pay scale raised, but this is that whole thing of when we can go through and we have this intermingling of roots, we're sharing the microbiomes at the root level, that microbiome then travels up the stem, into the leaves, and into the seed. Now that seed that we're harvesting off of that plant has the microbe 2.0. It's new and improved. It's going to be more resilient to your local conditions than that main plant. And this is that whole idea of farm-safe seed. It's locally adapted. Okay, let's crank it up one more level of let's have farm-safe seed from a polycrop condition. That's going to drive this resiliency, the productivity of our farms to that next level.
Does the seed just continue to get better and better and better if you continue to use these kind of methods?
So the question is, do your seed get better and better after using these conditions? Well, you'll start to plateau because you'll be turning all the right genes on. And then with the weather, it's going to change too. So this year we're wet, next year we're dry. So now we're going to need a slightly different microbiome to get us through. But if we have the right combination, so we have some wet, we have some wet and dry loving plants in there, cool and warm. Now we can have something so it's going to be more responsive so that the right genes can get turned on at the right time.
So you could save seed from a dry year that's been in a polyculture in a wet year, and then do a mixture of different phenotypes.
Yep.
So that way you've got more resiliency across the field because you have different lines.
More diversity and those different microbiomes. So it's really interesting. And so when we start talking about weeds being in there, guess what? Weeds are still intermingling. They're going to be still sharing microbiomes. So is that going to make the weeds stronger? Well, probably not, because there's such an early successional plant that it's probably not going to be a problem. So when you asked about, okay, so we're growing monocultures, but we're very diverse, this is when she starts talking about the legacy effect on that microbiome. So what will happen in the soil, so we have a good rotation, we're not doing these polycrops, not interested in doing it, but we have a really good diverse rotation. And we are true zero-till, very low disturbance. So what will happen is we have the rhizal sheath in the soil from the plant this year, and everything is going good. We harvest that crop, that rhizal sheath in the soil is going to be in the soil. So we're going to plant that next crop. That next crop is going to grow into that old rhizal sheath, and it's going to share the microbiome from the legacy effect into that new crop. We're going to harvest that crop. Now we're going to have two different types of rhizal sheaths in the soil, and that next plant we're going to grow in there is going to grow into both of those rhizal sheaths, and they're going to use. So this is where, with a really good rotation, we get this agronomic benefit. So there's going to be mycorrhizae in there, there's going to be bacteria, there's going to be amoeba, there's going to be all the stuff that we're needing. So we're, once again, biologically charging this soil. But we need to have the good rhizal sheath. And how do we do that? Root exudates. We want to make sure that we're supporting, there's some really good pictures Christine has about where they put fertilizer down. What happened to the rhizal sheath? It's gone. So we need to develop that rhizal sheath. And so every year, go out and every field, go out and check your rhizal sheath to see how we are building this soil and the microbiology. Oh, and by the way, in university, guess what two classes that I thought were a waste of time? Soil microbiology and plant ecology. Whoops. That's okay, I did a bunch of learning out of uni, so. So nutrient sharing, this is the other really neat thing. So, the science is chasing producer observations in a lot of these cases. So how much nitrogen does a legume provide to other species during the growing season? How much P can the mycorrhizae fungi supply to that legume? Yes?
I was always under the impression that legumes hung on to all the nitrogen that was in their bodies, and that it would become available to the soil when the legumes died, and the nitrogen would decompose. Is that wrong?
So the question is that they thought that the old research showed, or the research showed, that the legumes only accumulate and don't share. during the growing season. And guess what? That's once again, as we go along with technology, what they're finding is the legumes will release root exudates high in nitrogen. And once again, because they're not just sending out nitrogen, they're sending out amino acids, they're sending out complex nitrogen containing compounds. And what do we test for? Nitrate. So it doesn't release nitrate until the bacteria break it down. And this is where, if we're growing canola in with peas, because they're not mycorrhizal, the peas will release these nitrogen containing root exudates. The canola will grow up to it, and it'll take it away from the rhizosphere from that pea, but it won't actually have the mycorrhizate to do it, but it'll just soak it up. And so the pea will sense that, oh, we're losing nitrogen around the rhizosphere, so it'll release more. And so that's one of the ways. When we have the mycorrhizae, then it has that direct pathway of firing it over. So it's really interesting. And there's a research trial in southeast Saskatchewan with the Southeast Research Farm that they were doing. I suggested that they try this, growing a Roundup Ready soybean in between the rows of Roundup Ready corn. Not a big corn area, not a big soybean area, but and I said, pick a late maturing soybean, so this way it gets, I just wanted to get to potting, not to produce seed. And they seeded at 27,000 seeds of each. They put liquid inoculant on the soybeans, but no fungicide. The corn did have a fungicide seed treatment they couldn't get away from, but it turned out that soybean plant at 27,000 supplied about, equivalent to 60 pounds of nitrogen to the corn plant. So once again, we need to know this as producers, because anybody here want to cut 60 pounds of nitrogen out of their budget? One person? Okay, cool. Oh, two, okay. So there's these neat things, and this is where this intercropping, and growing the wheat crop and then throwing some subterranean clover in, throwing in some Persian clover, some of these annual clovers in with your cash crop to supply nitrogen. That's what I was doing. Once again, over every square meter or every square yard, we have 440 metric tons of nitrogen over each square meter of soil. Scottish Ukrainian, if something's free, guess what? I'm lining up. I'm going to get my share. So for 15 years, I did not buy nitrogen. And once again, when you're checking your nodules, make sure they're nice and pink. They're active. If they're gray, they're not active. They're not fixing nitrogen. So our nutrient sharing, so our drought tolerance. So this is in southern Saskatchewan. They end up with about 6 inches of rain. For them is a pretty wet year. So this is across the road from each other. This is a durum crop, so full synthetic, had nice seed treatment. They did it with the best agronomics that the agronomist can give them. There's that crop across the road. That's a polycrop. Crop insurance came out and said, well, you guys caught the rain and it stopped exactly at the road. So in our government, we have ostriches that like sticking their heads in the ground and ignoring what they can see right there. The other thing that we did with this farmer is he grew some durum, and I told him put 10 pounds of winter wheat in with your durum. Exact same response. When we have this green plant, that green plant is photosynthesizing, releasing root exudates, feeding the biology, creating a micro water cycle. Another great guide to listen to for YouTube is Walter Jenne and talking about the micro water cycles. Jehne. Great guy. Micro water cycles. And guess what? Anybody here having too much water in a drought? And once again, you see this. Wow. Guess what neighbors are doing that same as him? No one. Because it doesn't work here. So in here we have some taproots, and so one of the species we have, once again, is a little bit of chicory, a little bit of sweet clover. We have these taproots going down. They're highly mycorrhizal. That this way, there's a study in, I think it was Illinois or Iowa, can't remember. And what they did is they had 2 towers of soil, and they grew chickpeas and wheat. And on the one, they had a divider so that they couldn't intermingle. This one, the roots could intermingle and get mycorrhizae. So what they did is they induced drought stress on both these towers. Where they had a divider in there where these two roots couldn't interact, the wheat died. Because the chickpeas had a big taproot, it was still in the water. Where the chickpeas and the wheat could get mycorrhizae and they could have root intermingling, the wheat survived. So when you have these mycorrhizae plants, once again, not only are they sharing the microbiome, they're also sharing nutrients and water. So if the water is down deep, get a little bit of a taproot. The chicory will only get a couple inches high in that first year. It will overwinter, but it's relatively easy to take care of. But it's going to be bringing up and sharing water with the rest of those plants that you have growing. So livestock, working with a couple dairies that were able to create a total mixed ration right in the bag. And that's using a lot of these poly mixes. I'll bring up a couple of mixes in a little bit. So we have one ration for milking cows, one for dry cows, one for heifers. Minimal supplementation, we're actually adding straw in it because it is too rich, but there is no starch in the ration. Once we got the starch out of the ration, because a ruminant is not designed to eat grain, am I breaking brains yet? Once we got the starch out of it, all of the health problems disappeared. Milk production went up, milk fat went up. There was no spoilage in this pit. Conception rates went. Thanks for coming. I wasn't being facetious. She told me earlier she was going to leave. So, yeah, that didn't sound good, did it? So if anybody else feels that I'm wasting their time and I broke their brain to leave, and I won't. Yeah, the vet bills went down, and we took his feed and mineral costs from $15 per cow down to $5. What did that do to the bottom line?
Wait a second, I missed part of that. I'm kind of slow. You're talking really fast.
Oh, I'm giving her because I got lots to say, and I'm excited.
There's no starch, no carbohydrates in this?
There's water soluble carbohydrate, but there's no starch, very little starch. But the feed value of it.
So what was this?
I'm going to show you one of the blends. His lactic acid, in the lab they can get about 72% lactic acid in silage. In this bag, he was at up to 98%. And that's because the microbes are able to continue and break all of that water-soluble carbohydrate down, whereas starch creates some alcohol and some other byproducts that stops that fermentation process. So this is absolute rocket fuel. So this is one of the blends that we played around with at start, and we're cutting the oats at just after anthesis at flower, and getting some regrowth. So nothing really crazy. The corn, this is in northern Saskatchewan, so the corn, I don't even know if it got past tassel, but we just did it for the sugar. This is the one that we started cranking up and got a lot more diversity on, and started seeing some big gains in soil health. And once again, yeah, there it is. How does it relate to you? I don't know. But this is one of the blends that we designed around this, so that this way we can get 2 years out of it. So in this case, this is the protein. So I've done two. One with a low legume component, so this way if he's spreading manure on it, he doesn't need all that legume. Okay, we take a lot of legume out. In this case, it's going to be a place where he's not going to spread any manure. So this way we have grasses, we have vetches, sweet clover, chicory, plantain, sunflowers, turnips, ryegrass, Italian ryegrass, collards, Persian clover, Japanese millet, feed beet, phacelia, hairy vetch, and then mixing in some oats, spring triticale, peas, and winter triticale. Yes?
You said you get 2 years out of that mix?
Yes. Because when we look at what the species are, Festiolium is a short-term perennial. The vetch mostly winter kills. Sweet clover will overwinter. Chicory will overwinter. Plantain, that's just for soil conditioning. Italian ryegrass will overwinter here. Hairy vetch will overwinter, and then the winter triticale. So adding in the pounds and the number of seeds per square foot, there'll be enough to be able to chop or graze that next year, or hay.
When was that planted?
So this would be planted in the spring. Yep. So just an example of what a blend is. And, you know, is this 35? No. But when you look at the number of plant families in here, we're starting to rack them up. We're getting a lot of functionality in the soil for...
How many plant families you think you got here?
that would be about 12 if memory serves me correct. It might be 14. Yeah, so over here I have the plant types. So cool season grass, cool season legume. I don't have their annual, biennial, perennial. And that's the kind of multiplier again.
So the total mass on that was how many pounds?
So this would be 14.5 pounds of this, and then 50, 110, 150 pounds of this on the bottom.
Is that total pounds, 2473, that's total pounds?
That's total pounds for 170 acres of just this blend.
Oh, that's just the seed, we're not talking about production.
Oh, yeah, production. Yeah. No, I don't talk production because way too many variables and too many lawsuits.
Oh, that mix there with summer here,
Oh, yeah.
and then be able to go back into the fall.
Yeah, like who started us out in this was green cover seeds, and if you look at green cover seeds price sheets, that's a good chunk out of anybody. And well, once again, that's who we started. But you guys have species. It's not, nothing is proprietary. To do a blend like this, you know, it kind of sounds like familiar on the price sheets. Doesn't matter who you go to. So it's who's able to work with you on it. So on grain, you know, nitrogen, once again, limiting function of our plants. So ideally, the way you get around buying a bunch of nitrogen, put legumes in. It's simple. Do you want to have them low so they're not interfering with harvest, or do you have to do separation? Do you want to have overwintering? Do you want to have these low-growing perennials? Do you want to have it growing in and doing a separation, doing a polycrop? It's all up to you. So there's 440 metric tons. That mycorrhizae association between the two plants. So this is flax and chickpeas. Great mix to get in for a starter. You're gonna have to do a little bit of separation on them, but it's simple. Some decent money, and especially under a dry year. And then, you know, the other thing we threw in here was a little bit of Italian ryegrass. And the Italian ryegrass, once again, the flax is your broadleaf, your legume is your chickpeas, and a little bit of Italian ryegrass, or winter wheat, or winter triticale, or fall rye. There's your biennial grass. Grain, relay cover cropping, another option. So this is some sweet corn that I was growing, and what I did is I went to wide rows, and I had a three-way annual clover underneath the canopy. Went with conventional corn, used accent and bromoxynil, and it, once again, low water, and it kind of damaged the clover a little bit, but it recovered and away it went. And it was green right down to the bottom, even though we were in a drought.
When was that planted? Intercropping, what is it?
So that is Persian clover, crimson clover, subterranean clover.
When did you plant that?
So I seeded that clover first mix, and then I seeded the corn into it when the clover was just starting to poke up. That is not competition for a corn plant because coevolution. They need to grow together. If they don't grow together, you're buying inputs.
Wheat, was that also spring planted wheat or fall? The previous.
The previous, so in here, so I told the grower to put the winter wheat in with this when he's seeding.
Spring or fall?
Spring, that was spring seeded winter wheat.
Okay.
So that this way it stays vegetative throughout the growing season. So we can, with his relay cover cropping, grow cover crop does not get harvested. It's just going to stay on the bottom. Could be a second cash crop. So once again, oh, yep.
You suggested with that
Yeah, throw some honeybees out there. Now what happens? So when we start talking about weeds, when we start building our fungi in the soil, many of the weeds just disappear because now we've increased our fungal bacteria ratio. It's past where a weed wants to grow because we've changed our nitrogen form from nitrate over to amino acids and proteins. And that changes our whole farming philosophy. So intercropping, that's 2 more cash crops at the same time. You can do some separation, make sure you have seed size difference, seed density, or color differences to make them separated. So if you're going to grow corn and soy together, good luck separating them. Peas and canola is good. We've done canola and soybean by default because it just volunteered. Oats and flax works really good. So these monoculture stands are not natural. Show me in nature where something's a monoculture. They don't like to exist. So nature will supply weeds to balance what the soil needs. So kind of what we were talking about of weeds start disappearing. Well, we're actually supplying what that soil is needing. So that large number of species, not necessary, but making sure that those different species that we're putting in are from different functional plant groups. They're doing different things to our system. And that functional plant group diversity is one of the principles of soil health. Doesn't matter whose principles you're talking to, whether it's 4 principles or 20 principles. That one is always in there. It's crucial. Everybody got pictures of that? If anybody wants a copy of these presentations, just let me know. 5 minutes. How's that? Ending. Okay, so let's see anybody with some cover crop experience. Name me some of the species that are in this mix. Okay, so next question is, where is this where did I take this picture? Oh, my hand. Okay, so where is my hand?
In Canada?
No.
Australia?
Eastern Australia. He was out, it was dry, and he had his drill out and he was going out and seeding more because it might rain. It does rain. It may not rain this year, but yeah, exactly. That first rain ends the dry spell and you're back into a wet. And so he's putting it in and he's looking for cow. So, the diversity, you go through there and he asked me what I thought and you don't see the chicory in the sample, but you see a little bit of the other stuff. It's diversity. He said, what do I need to add? And I said, oh, you've covered off a lot of it. So.
Were they grazing that, or were they hanging it, or what?
So the question is, are they hanging it, grazing it? They're going to be rotationally grazing it.
Okay.
So sunflowers, I found that the animals really don't like it. And if you don't wonder why the animals kind of graze around sunflowers, just take a leaf and rub it on your tongue. You'll soon learn why. But
Delete the heads out.
once they go past flower and they tip over, so I was grazing 85 bison on 400 acres. And they were out there grazing, and they had sunflowers in there, and they're grazing around them. And I thought, okay, so I'll just trample them down. One day, one of the cows decided they're going to take a bite. Within 2 days on 400 acres, all the sunflowers are gone. So once they got a taste, or it got cold enough, or who knows, once again, I'm not a bison or a cow, so I really don't know what the trigger is, but all of a sudden, boom, they wanted them. Same as the chicory. The chicory was up about this high, our second-year chicory, and I thought, okay, it's going to catch snow, it's going to be soil armor, they'll trample it. Went out there a week later, and it's only this high. Went out a week later, and it was this high. They were just, because it's a forb and it has these secondary plant metabolites, they don't need much. It's just a little bit of a bite. Then when the guy picked up the bison and took them home, he had the yearling bulls, I had the yearling heifers, and he said he had to process the bulls. They were being fed hay and some tired pasture. He said he had to deworm his bulls. Heifers came back from my place and they said he didn't have to deworm them. And that's because when they eat enough chicory and plantain, it's a natural dewormer. Yep. Yes? The tannins. So it's part of the tannins, and it's also, there's some other secondary plant metabolites that boost the immune system that kick the worms out of the gut. So it's, that's in Australia and New Zealand. That's exactly what they do. They have a paddock that is straight plantain and chicory, and that is their flushing.
Really?
And then if you want to put pounds on animals, when we had these cover crops in hunting season, people would be around. They would want to hunt on around our land. With the bison, it's tough to hunt in the bison, but they were out hunting, and they were really frustrated because they couldn't see anything. A week after hunting season, all of a sudden there's 350 deer out on our land. And they said, well, okay, number one, where were they? Number two, why are they all on your land? They're not on neighbors, they're on ours. Chicory and plantain, there's collards, I got the whole smorgasbord, but it's the plantain and chicory where they would paw in and they would go after those. We had a moose that was laying with her head on the side on the ground, chewing, trying to get that last bit of chicory that was on the ground. So, motivated? Oh yeah. And that's that whole diversity thing. Like, if given a choice, if you give a cow, it doesn't matter how dumb you think they are, they'll do their own rations. You give them the smorgasbord, and Jimmy's not in the room. He did stop. Last story. Jimmy, he has a GoPro on a cow, and if you go on YouTube, you can see how this cow grazed in a day in these cover crops. How they went to one plant during the morning, and then they went over to another in the afternoon.
I think it was Lucy.
Lucy the cow. So, Lucy the cow. Yeah, Jimmy Emmons. So I'd like to thank you for your attention, your questions, awesome. I'm going to be hanging around out here if anybody is interested in doing further talking. I was just going to say there's about 12 of my books left if anybody's interested. They're $20 each. So thank you for your attention. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.